Welcome into the Super Wildcard Weekend edition of the RotoWire Sports Betting Pod. Nick Whalen and John McKechnie here with you as we are every Thursday evening, and we'll continue to be through the Super Bowl. We're not slowing down, John, just because the regular season is over. We're brought to you by Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday, as you know, is in Las Vegas this year. You could watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more, or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve your spot today at circalasvegas.com. We're also brought to you by FanDuel. You've probably heard of FanDuel. If you're listening to a RotoWire podcast, you can tackle millions of prizes all playoffs long in FanDuel fantasy contests. If you're new to fantasy, there's no better time to get in on the action because right now, new customers get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So you put in $100, you get a free $100 from FanDuel. Got to use it on FanDuel, of course, before you withdraw, but still, heck of a deal. Playing fantasy for huge cash prizes on FanDuel is fun and it's exciting. Just draft your lineup, watch your team move up the leaderboard. I know you and I play on FanDuel all the time, John. Super fun. Yeah. I do a contest with my friends every Sunday. It's just a great way to diversify. Everybody plays, season-long fantasy. You got some betting and whatnot going, but, why not add some DFS to the mix? Plus, on FanDuel, you can choose from a full slate of contests featuring multiple games, single-game contests, season-long best ball, beginner-only contests, which are great for learning the ropes, and more. And when you win, you get paid right away, instantly. So kick off the NFL playoffs with a 100% deposit match up to $100. Go to FanDuel.com to start playing for huge cash prizes today. All right. Those are some longer reads than normal, John. But we got to get our sponsorship obligations out of the way. Now we can talk some football. We got 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and then the granddaddy of them all, Eagles-Bucks on Monday Night Football. Let's start with Browns-Texans. We'll go chronologically through the board as we always do. Browns are 2-point favorites on the road, John, total 44.5. Where do you lean on this game?
Well, I think I'm pretty aligned with where the public is on this one. I've said for weeks that I think the Browns are the most dangerous of the AFC teams playing in the wild card weekend. They've just been on a roll. They really, not only did they not slow down after the Deshaun Watson season-ending injury, but they've played better. Like, this is the best that they've looked maybe like in their history, like since they came back in 99. Like it's been crazy. Flacco just tapping back into his crazy 2012 playoff run type of stuff. They're throwing the ball a ton. David Njoku, Amari Cooper should be good to go for this one. We know what he did last time against the Texans a few weeks back with just a monster performance in that one. It's the first playoff game for both D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud. That bodes ill. I know that we reference these guys every week because they do such a good job breaking it down. But over on the Action Network, they note that quarterbacks making their first playoff start against quarterbacks who have playoff experience. Joe Flacco has, I think, 15 games worth, 17, 35-1 against the spread, and 17 and 36 straight ups dating back to 2002. Those are some tough numbers staring Stroud and company in the face here. You worry about the fact that the Texans may not be at full strength on their defensive line. That's particularly problematic when you already have a good Browns offensive line. So even if those guys are all active, like Will Anderson, John Grenard, they might not be at their full potential here. It's just going to be tough for the Texans. They are at home and everything, but I think there's a reason why they're home underdogs in this spot.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the Flacco numbers versus, first-time playoff quarterback. Flacco alone, 10-5 straight up in his postseason career, 11-4 against the number. I do think, I don't think that these teams are necessarily like 5.5 points apart, depending on what you think home field is worth, but I don't think it's wrong if the Browns are favored here. And
no.
I don't necessarily know that going into Houston is a huge disadvantage. I do think this Browns team, ironically, would be built well to be playing in Buffalo or playing in Kansas City this weekend. But, it's been the passing game, really, that's been the story since Joe Flacco has taken over. And I think getting this game in a dome in Houston, Certainly Cleveland has the rest advantage after a pseudo bye week in week 18. A lot of guys on that defense, especially, have kind of been banged up week to week. That gives them a chance to recover. And, they should get Amari Cooper back in the mix, Elijah Moore. Both those guys are now off the injury report. And on the other side of things, Houston's obviously coming off of a must-win game in week 18. Their entire defensive line has been banged up for several weeks now. We'll see how many, if any, of those guys end up being ruled out. In the receiving core, Noah Brown, I think, is a true 50-50 right now. We'll see. He's been very limited, if not practicing at all, for certain days this week. Robert Woods is considered questionable as well. And we've talked a lot about Houston missing Tank Dell. It's like if you're down Noah Brown or even Robert Woods, who I know has not been a huge factor for them, I think Houston needs to be at close to full strength to beat this Browns team.
They do, and the fact that they very likely will not be, that's tough. You really are putting things on CJ Stroud's shoulders, and you don't expect them to have like a ton of ability to take the pressure off of him with the run game because the Browns' run defense is strong. So it's going to take really, I think, a Herculean effort from Stroud in this one. And who thought that the Texans would even be here coming into this season or even sniffing the playoffs? Maybe even next year it would have been considered kind of a long shot. But, he's beaten the odds all year long. So I think that we do get set up with a really entertaining game. I hate that one of these teams doesn't get to advance because I'd love to see either of these guys in the divisional round against whomever. But I do think that, this is a spot where experience matters and momentum to an extent, but resting everyone last week notwithstanding, I think Cleveland is just playing a superior brand of ball at the right time of the year. So I think they're the squad here to back.
Yeah, I'm on Cleveland as well. I do think we get a close game. The Herculean effort from Stroud is not out of the question. I think he's proven that he's certainly capable of a game like that. I kind of feel the same way about, Jordan Love and the Packers. Like if they're going to hang around with Dallas, it's going to take a Herculean Jordan Love game, and he's had a few of those down the stretch. So I'm certainly not writing off Houston. And I think what could keep the Texans in the mix here is the turnovers for Cleveland. I think that's the one thing that, as fun as this Joe Flacco run has been for the last 5 or 6 weeks, he's got multiple turnovers in just about every game that he started. So I think if Flacco throws 2 or 3 picks, obviously Houston's going to be able to hang around. So that would kind of be the one key for me for the Houston Texans. Let's go to Dolphins Chiefs. This is a night game on Saturday, and I think we have to start with the weather here, John.
We do. It's so you live in Wisconsin. I've lived in Wisconsin. It's cold in the Midwest this time of year. It's a different type of cold in Kansas City, but if you've not been living under a rock this week, you're well aware of the just sort of end of times level temperatures that we're going to be seeing at Arrowhead this weekend. It's going to be like, I think sub-zero as far as the real temperature, and the wind chill could get it down to like the the -30 range, something crazy like that. So a bit frosty. Definitely gonna want to bring your hand warmers in your fanny packs if you're Tua and you're Patrick Mahomes. But I hate to just give the basic take, but it's really tough to trust Miami in cold weather. In January, having to go there. And I think, this is really punishment for the way that they squandered the division, right? Like, they were so well set up. I don't remember exactly what the odds were, at like week 11, week 12, something like that for them to win the East, but they must have been just, almost, -1,000, something like that. And for them to have the chance to, despite all their misgivings late in the season, they still had a chance to lock up the number 2 seed, and all importantly, a home playoff game in Miami. They let the Bills go in there, do their thing once again. Real kind of like stark contrast where you did expect Josh Allen to deliver the big moment in that game, and then on the other side, when the Dolphins got the ball back with a chance to tie the game, at any point did you feel like Tua had it in him to bring them back?
I did not, John. I did not.
No. So that bodes ill. I think that the fact that they're kind of stumbling into the postseason is tough. And I know that, the Chiefs haven't looked nearly to the level that we saw last year, or really for the majority of the Patrick Mahomes era. But I still think that they are the superior side to back here. I think the one X factor, the one kind of path that the Dolphins could have to making this interesting is if basically McDaniel has to decide to take the ball out of Tua's hands a little bit here. I know that's kind of counter to their DNA because they've gotten by on the explosive passing game so much, but their run game on an efficiency basis has been the best in the league. It's like 5.1 yards per carry. That's unbelievable efficiency at the NFL level. If Mostert and Achane were at 100% for this one, I'd feel a little bit better, but I still feel like they will be effective on the work that they get. But if they start to fall behind, they're not going to have that luxury of being able to run the ball, and things could get out of hand for the Dolphins, who also are critically banged up on the defensive side of the ball here. So oddly enough, I feel like running it is the way for Miami to stay competitive in this one. I just am skeptical that they're going to stick to that formula and that game plan, depending on how the game goes. And if this Chiefs offense wakes up, they get behind, Tua feels the pressure, and things get unraveled quickly for the Dolphins.
See, I don't even know if Kansas City has to wake up here. And, I think the weather really, really helps Kansas City, right? I mean, this is kind of a worst case scenario spot for Miami when you factor that in. I mean, this is going to be the coldest game that Tua's played in by like a good 30 degrees. And that's before even factoring in the wind chill. We're just talking like the normal temperature. And, it could be -10, -20 type of wind chill when we get to 9, 10 o'clock in Kansas City on Saturday night. And, I would love to pick Miami to beat Kansas City, because I think the Chiefs are as vulnerable as they've ever been, right? And, I think the way things are kind of lining up for them, I think they can grind this game out. I don't think they need to solve anything. I don't even know if it's possible to solve, a bad passing offense when it's -20 degrees out. Like, it just might be a rock fight type of game. So I actually think Miami can hang around and maybe cover, but that's partially because I don't think Kansas City's putting up like 28, 31 points. I could see this being like a 21-17 type of game where, Kansas City catches a couple breaks at home late. Patrick Mahomes does Patrick Mahomes things. But I don't see the Chiefs like running away with this. I think when it's so cold and the elements kind of standardize things, it's tough to really feel great about one side or the other. But obviously, if you were making a list of teams that would struggle in these conditions, Miami's probably number one on that list.
They absolutely are. And, I think it's interesting also that this game opened as the Chiefs as 3-point favorites, and we're looking at 4.5 now.
Right.
So that,
right,
relative
Bills.
to the other games, relative to the other games on this slate, I think that might be the most movement that we've seen as far as the point spread is concerned. And certainly coming into this one, we wouldn't have expected this to have the second lowest total on the slate, but the weather obviously playing a huge role in that as well.
Yeah. I mean, you also forget this is Tua's first playoff game, right? I mean, he's been in our lives for so long. He's not a rookie by any means, but he's never started the playoff game. It was Skylar Thompson last year. So that stat that you brought up, of quarterbacks who played in the playoffs versus quarterbacks who haven't, that applies here as well. All right, Steelers Bills. We have had a little line movement here. I'm seeing 9.5 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It had been sitting at 10 for most of the week. Another game where weather will play a key factor. And, I think we still need to wait another day or two to see exactly what's going to be going on in Buffalo, but it's not going to be good, John. It's not going to be good. This is a noon game on Sunday. It's going to be more of a wind game than a cold game. I mean, it's supposed to be around 22, 25 degrees in the afternoon in Buffalo. That's about right for this time of year. But we're looking, as of right now, at 20 to 25 mile per hour sustained winds. And as you know, John, wind, it tends to gust. So it's going to be above that at times. How do we factor that in here? I know I just said, these elements that can kind of standardize things. Does this play into Pittsburgh's favor at all?
Well, the less that they have to rely on Mason Rudolph, the better. And I think you have a stable in Najee Harris, who actually ran quite well to close the season, and Jaylen Warren, who is like everybody's favorite backup running back. So if they can get that established, I think that certainly bodes well for them. And Buffalo, the weather and a game like this last year was kind of their undoing, their inability to run the football. But James Cook has been much better this year as a pure runner. They have Leonard Fournette to kind of push the pile, do that bobsled play that they did a million times last week against the Dolphins. So there's that. I think Josh Allen might be a little bit more willing to go as a runner. And if he's running it a bunch and he's getting tackled by defensive backs, like I think as the game wears on, like he has that same effect as like a grinding running back where it's like it's frigid temperatures and you got this big dude who's pretty fast, just bowling you over every single time. I think that's going to have a cumulative effect a little bit. And then also we all know the splits when it comes to Pittsburgh sans TJ Watt, they're not pretty if you're in on Pittsburgh. So I think that you have to worry about their defense slipping a little bit, and the defense was going to be the thing that they needed to hang their hat on to stay competitive in this game. With no Watt, I think it makes plenty of sense as to why this is a double-digit spread at some books. A little surprised to see it come back down. Maybe there's just some general public volume coming in on the Steelers, but it's about 50-50 split as far as the DraftKings Sportsbook is concerned. I think the Bills do end up covering this one. Traditionally, teams that are heavy favorites in the playoffs, especially in the wild card round, they not only tend to win, but they tend to cover as well.
Very true. Very true. And I feel the same way. And yeah, this game is in some ways, mirrors the Miami KC game in another aspect, which is like, I don't think Buffalo deserves to be in the divisional round. Like, I don't think KC does either. They haven't played well enough. And I think both teams ended up with a pretty nice draw here as the 2 and the 3 seeds. And in all likelihood, I see them meeting up in Buffalo in the divisional, which will be, a monster game, obviously, but it'll feel different, right? Because neither of these teams are playing at the level that we expected. But I don't think Pittsburgh's a very good team. I think asking Mason Rudolph to try to throw the ball in 35-mile-an-hour gusts is just not going to go very well. And I think both teams are going to try to control it on the ground. I think Buffalo's going to end up doing a better job of that. I would not be surprised if Pittsburgh covers. Again, same logic as we talked about with Miami and KC. This could be a very low-scoring game, right? And sometimes we expect that and it goes the other way, but I think both teams are going to be, long drives, keep the ball on the ground. Clock's going to be running. I don't see Buffalo, running away with this game necessarily. And I don't know that they're capable of that. Much like Kansas City, Buffalo's in terms of wins and losses. Yeah, they finished the season strong, 5 in a row. But other than that Dallas win in week 15, it's like you squeak by the Chargers, you squeak by the Patriots in the game you probably should have lost. Even the Miami game trailed for most of it. Wasn't very convincing last week in a spot where Miami's super banged up. So, I still think Buffalo's a little overvalued. I don't trust the Pittsburgh Steelers to get this done. So I absolutely love Buffalo to win it straight up. I don't know that I would play it though. I wouldn't play it at 10. At 9.5, it's a little bit more appealing. I will say Najee Harris, you can get his rushing attempt prop is at 15.5. I like that. I feel like we're being baited because he's had like 53 carries over the last 2 games. Even if this turns into a situation where Pittsburgh's trailing and they have can you throw? Is that even an option, right? I still think they're going to have to try to climb back into this game on the ground if they do fall behind.
No, I think so. You cannot abandon the run if Mason Rudolph is your quarterback. You need to keep that in the mix. And Buffalo, I don't think they have the best run defense, linebacking core, what have you. I think that going the physical route with them, a la what Cincinnati did last year, I think is the way to go. So if they can get that going early and continue that through the game, then they have a puncher's chance of keeping this close. But a win, I really don't expect that. I think that there's a good reason why the Steelers enter the playoffs with the longest Super Bowl odds by a pretty wide margin over at the FanDuel Sportsbook, plus 13,000 to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. And I think that definitely checks out.
All right, let's go to the afternoon and the night games on Sunday. These are the 2 that I'm looking most forward to, and we'll start with Packers-Cowboys. Cowboys are 7-point favorites right now at DraftKings. It was up at 7.5 earlier this week, so maybe a little bit of movement there, but it's held pretty steady. We've seen the Cowboys falter in the playoffs before. We've seen it against Green Bay. Obviously, that was a much different version of the Packers, but I think this game will be contrary to the first 3 on Super Wildcard Weekend. We had a total at 50.5. That's a good 15 points higher than Steelers Bills. I think we get points. I really do. I still don't trust the Green Bay defense. You got to tip your cap. We were both on Chicago last week. I love the Bears to win that game. I thought this would be kind of a re-exposing of Joe Barry, if you will. It was not. It was a game that both teams have long drives. Chicago only had 6 drives on the afternoon, which is crazy, right? That's if you could shorten the game to that degree, then that's going to play into Green Bay's favor, because I think the more opportunities you give a team, especially like Dallas at home, against that defense, eventually it's going to break. I don't think that the Packers have found some sort of miracle cure for what's just been a terrible defense for most of the season.
So what is the pulse of the Packers nation up there right now? How's everybody feeling after winning the last 2 games of the season, finding their way into the playoffs, especially after things seem to be hanging in the balance a little bit? You lose that Monday night game to the Giants. All of a sudden all that momentum that you had built up through November and early December goes out the window a little bit. But last 2 weeks, pretty convincing stuff. How are the people feeling up there?
The people that I've talked to, I think everybody's been very surprisingly reasonable. I don't. There's nobody's expecting the Packers to go into Dallas and win this game. I think the Giants game, the Bucks game, even the Carolina game that they won, like that felt the dirtiest of them all.
Yeah,
those games, they were within the last month. Like those are still fresh in the memory. I think this season was all about identifying whether or not Jordan Love is the guy. I think he's answered that about as affirmatively as he could. So that's the real win. I think just making the playoffs feels like a victory, which. I mean, this is the first time that the Packers are playing a playoff game in 20, 30 years where it feels like you're playing with house money. So it's a weird contrast because, these games have been do or die in the state of Wisconsin for so long. And it's kind of relaxing, I think, in some ways to be able to go into a game and say, yeah, if we get beat by 20, that's kind of what we expected. That's what the Cowboys do at home. With that said, I mean, it's hard not to be optimistic about this offense right now. The defense is where people are still very skeptical. I don't know anybody who is like jumped back on it and like, you know what, Joe Barry, he's actually pretty good. All right, we've been wrong for the last 3 months. I think there's that fear that the defense is still ready to collapse at any moment. But not only Jordan Love playing well, but being able to unearth the performances that they have out of Bo Melton and Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed and Christian Watson has not played in weeks. Romeo Doubs has just not really been much of a contributor, and it just hasn't mattered. So I think there's a lot of tangible excitement about the future, and there's a belief that if you get one of those, dare I say, wacky Dak Prescott games, that anything can happen here. Because I do think Dallas is going to struggle to stop Green Bay. Like the way they're playing offensively, I think the Packers could score 24, 28 points. The problem is I think Dallas is scoring 30 plus.
Right, exactly. So I think that Dak Prescott angle is the important one because as we've talked about throughout this podcast, you had first time playoff starter versus someone with experience. Dak Prescott, like his playoff experience, like almost works against him in this case. It feels like, he has not been overly right. It just hasn't been impressive from him in the postseason for the most part, except like against the ghost of Tom Brady last year, maybe. But I think bottom line here, the Packers defense probably isn't going to be able to slow down Dallas over the course of 4 quarters. But I think Dak Prescott could help keep the Packers in, and I do expect the Packers, especially with the way their passing game is going, as long as the pass rush for Dallas isn't getting home constantly and just ending drives with sacks. I do expect the Packers to keep pace. I think they are one of my favorite underdogs to cover this weekend. And yeah, I mean, if I can catch this at 7.5, I definitely like the Packers.
Yeah, 7.5. That's where I'd lean. At 7, I still like Dallas. I know that's maybe a bit of a fallacy, but I think Dallas is going to score enough points that Green Bay ultimately can't keep up. But I think we get a fun, competitive game. I think it's going to be a nice, kind of contrast to what we see on Saturday and early on Sunday. Rams-Lions, John. This is the night game on Sunday, and this is the one I am most excited for. I think this is going to be an awesome showdown. It's in Detroit. Highest total of the week, 51.5. Still awaiting, definitive word on Sam Laporta. That's obviously a huge one for Detroit. Did not practice yesterday. Did not practice today. I will be surprised if he's out there. I think Dan Campbell is, maintaining eternal optimism as he typically does. I don't think they're going to have Laporta. I will say, even before that injury, I like the Rams here. I think this is the spot. It's a little concerning to me that like everybody we've talked to on the radio show this week feels the same way. It's becoming a little too trendy for my liking, but I think the Rams are the better team. I think both of these teams are super balanced. They could both kill you on the ground. They both have playmakers through the air, but I liked the Rams playmakers more coming into the week. And now if you take Laporta out of the equation, plus Khalif Raymond, one of their depth receivers, he's not going to play. All of a sudden, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's great. You don't have a whole lot else. And, on the other side, you got arguably the best receiver duo in the league. I don't think it would be my number one, but it's in the conversation. Kupp and Nakua, Kyron Williams, David Montgomery, maybe that kind of cancels out in some ways. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs is still there for Detroit, but I think this is going to be an uphill battle for the Lions. And, I trust their defense a little bit less than I do the Rams. Neither have been good. But I think that we're bound for a shootout here.
I think so too. The total certainly agrees with you, and I hope that this one lives up to that billing. I mean, 51.5. If we get the over in that one, then we'll have had a good Sunday night before even getting to the result. I go back and forth on this one. I think you lay out a great case for the Rams. Stafford, the kind of proverbial homecoming. Lions, this is their first home playoff game since 1993, I want to say. A lot of storylines in this one, very befitting of catching the Sunday night time slot. I want to lean Detroit, though. I think that them being at home, crazy environment, the Laporta thing stinks, but I think that there's still kind of like the requisite speed on that Detroit offense. You have a good offensive line that should be able to give Goff enough time to operate. And you have, a guy like Jameson Williams who has game-breaking speed. Jahmyr Gibbs, if he can get to the edge regularly, I think that presents a pretty big problem for the Rams. So I think that the offensive line and the team speed of the Lions is going to be the thing that gives them the edge offensively. Defensively, like you said, I mean, the Lions have been very easy to pick on, especially through the past. That's a huge problem when you're facing a team like the Rams that has that killer combo of Kupp and Nakua. But I don't know. There's just something about it. I'm feeling Dan Campbell getting the win in his first playoff game. It's interesting to me that 76% of the money is coming in on the Rams. I mean, and I definitely understand that angle, but I'm just going to kind of try to stand firm, dig my heels in, and say, one pride. Lions do it.
Okay. I mean, to me, it comes down to, like, you're giving me points with the Rams. I think even in Detroit, both these teams play indoors. I don't think that really helps or hurts either side. Like, I think these teams are close to dead even. And if you're giving me 3 points with the Rams, that's the way I'll lean. All due respect to Dan Campbell, I think the Rams have the coaching advantage. I think they have the quarterback advantage. They most certainly have the experience advantage. And it's a weird spot for Jared Goff, right? I think this game will tell us a lot about him. And it's not like his whole career comes down to whether or not he plays well on Sunday, but it could go one of two ways, right? It's either a revenge game against the team that basically booted you after you didn't play well in the Super Bowl, or it's okay, man, this is the team that didn't want me, and I had a chance to show them, and I didn't. And again, it can always go either way with Jared Goff. You never know. And I think both teams play well. I'm not saying this is going to be a Rams romp by any means, but I think when push comes to shove, especially if Laporta's not out there, and there's been so many Lions games this year. Last week was one of them where it's, you look at the drive chart, it's like touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Like, if they get involved in a touchdown off with the Rams, I think the Rams are the team that I want. They have more options.
They definitely do. The Kupp and Nakua is just such a scary combo against that secondary. The Rams for their part, if Laporta's out, they can kind of allocate more resources to stopping the middle of the field where Amon-Ra St. Brown is camping out a lot of the time. If they can hold Amon-Ra St. Brown like under 80 yards in this one, and no touchdowns, like, then I think the Lions are in trouble. I think he's a huge factor in this one in order for the Lions to go ahead and get this win, get this cover. If he gets slowed down, they're in trouble. But I'm not completely convinced that the Rams have the personnel to make that happen.
Eagles Bucks. This is the Monday night special. Game is in Tampa. Bucks are 3-point home dogs. 44 is our total. I wrote this week, John, in Beating the Book, I think this is the most confounding game to me on the slate. No result would really surprise me here. You could, obviously, the way the Eagles have played for the last 6 weeks, they could completely no-show this game. It could be the end of Nick Sirianni, and we think about this team completely differently going forward. Or I could see this being a spot where, either the Eagles kind of come back to semi-reality, the team that they were early in the season, and kind of exert their will now that they're a little bit healthier. The more likely scenario to me is, again, much like I think Kansas City will do to Miami and Buffalo will do to Pittsburgh, I think the Eagles grind out a win. I think we look at it and say, man, I still just don't really think this team is that good. But I don't really trust Tampa Bay here. I don't know that Baker Mayfield's fully healthy. I think they obviously big win, I guess, over Carolina last week. That was about as uninspiring as it possibly could have been. I will say I like the over in this game, even though both quarterbacks are not playing that well. These are two of the top 4 teams in terms of receiving yardage allowed this season. Like, both secondaries hemorrhage yards. So especially if A.J. Brown looks like A.J. Brown and doesn't show the ill effects of whatever injury that was last week, I actually think this could be, I wouldn't go as far as to say a shootout, but a sneaky high-scoring game.
Right, at least relative to the total. I was shocked doing some research this week. The Eagles allowed the 3rd most points in the NFL this year?
Dang.
I mean,
shocked based on how they finished, no.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. But like on paper, it just doesn't add up. Like, there's talent everywhere, except maybe you could argue the linebacker spot, but it shouldn't be as bad as it's been for the Eagles. Yeah. But kind of gave them a chance last week with one more get right spot against the Giants. They no-showed that one. I'm not sure that they had the luxury of doing that. I think they need to have a little bit of positive tailwinds after the way that December went to come into the playoffs with. But as gross as it is, like it's the NFC South generally is like the worst division winner that gets to play in the postseason every single year, and the Bucs probably no different in my opinion. But even still, I think the Bucs are a little plucky. I've said so all year. They haven't been great at covering at home. They've been better at that on the road. I know these two teams played earlier this season. I don't think that game is particularly informative for this one, but bottom line, like you said, both these defenses are leaky in the secondary. Baker Mayfield gets an extra day to get that ankle right. I think the Bucs can not only cover this one, but it wouldn't completely stun me if they win. It's less to do with the Bucs and more to do with the Eagles, but even still, you'd have to give the Bucs credit if they were able to pull this one off. But that's the way I'm leaning. I like the underdogs in this spot at home.
I think if you're taking the Bucs with the points, honestly, I'd just take the money line. It's like if they can keep this to a 1 or a 2 point game, I think they just probably win outright at that point if it's that close. So yeah, I'm totally split on this one. I'm willing to hear you out. I was the only one in staff picks who took the Eagles, and like I said, I didn't feel good about it. Yeah, it was almost a clean sweep on the Bucs, but I laid it on the line there. I will say, I dug up a good note via ESPN this week. The Eagles are the 6th team in the Super Bowl era, John, to enter the playoffs on at least a 6-game ATS losing streak. Each of the previous 5 won their first playoff game that season.
Oh, well, that's an interesting trend. I mean, would it completely shock you if the Eagles tapped back into their previous form? Like, no, and win that game. But I'm just going to go with how things have gone with them. They are the only team, I think, to start out 10-1 and not reach 12 wins, like ever. So
I think they pushed out their win total, right? I think it was right at 10.
Ooh, yikes! I got last Sunday was brutal. Losing the Bills under 10.5, and a certain AFC South champion future also going out the window. But I digress. Look, I will say, but to bring the vibe back up, the mustache looking strong. This is as strong as it's looked.
I do appreciate you saying that. I normally I would trim it a little bit more, and we're as we're moving this week, so like hygiene has just been out the window. Like I don't even, like, half my stuff is at the new house. I'm sitting in, you can probably hear the echo. I'm just in like an empty room. So yeah, I haven't really had a chance to trim it up as I normally do, but it's getting there. Eventually I'll get to your level. I always feel inferior when we do this pod, and like it looks better in person, I feel like, and then I get on camera and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Like I just need to get rid of this thing altogether. Anyway, well, I think we're going to be split on that game. I lean Eagles. It's like a 52-48 game for me. But obviously you could totally see Tampa Bay pulling the upset. I mean, I wrote in Beating the Book, I would pick the Eagles to lose to any other team in the NFC except for Tampa Bay, any other team in the playoffs. I think Green Bay would beat the Eagles.
I do too. I absolutely do. So this ends up being a good draw for the Eagles. What an ill-deserved good draw, given how they ended the season there. But I'm not going to be surprised if Philly goes home sad on Monday night and they have a long, long offseason ahead of them if that's the case. Yeah. I mean, starting 10-1 after winning the NFC last year, bowing out wild card weekend on Monday Night Football to the Bucs, like the undercardest of undercard games this weekend. Tough.
It would be fitting though with how this Eagle season has gone, and like I know you and I think we do a pretty good job of not driving too far down narrative street most weeks, but it would be a fitting end, right? I mean, it's kind of felt like the Eagles are careening toward a disaster wild card game this entire time.
It does. They again may not be fully healthy. We expect Devontae and AJ Brown to play, but are they going to be their normal selves? And I think the Bucs, like, I think they probably relish this opportunity. Baker certainly does. That Mike Evans and Chris Godwin getting like red hot down the stretch there. Like, you have two really legit threats against a secondary where the corners have basically aged out over the course of the season.
Yeah, and by the way, Devontae Smith full practice today. He looks like he's going to be good. AJ Brown did not practice, so I think they're a day behind everybody else because they play on Monday. Right. So it's maybe not quite as important, but it's well within the realm of possibility that AJ Brown could miss this game. I mean, we still haven't really gotten a ton of details as far as what exactly is going on with that knee. All right, I'm going to give you a parlay of the week, John. I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs -4.5 against Miami. I think they grind out an ugly win at home. Taking the Cleveland Browns money line, not messing around with the 2 points. We're just taking the money line, and we're taking the Rams money line as well. That's at +135 right now at DraftKings. That gets us to almost 7-1, +670.
Ooh, I do like that. I'm in agreement with you on each of those plays. Of course, I'm gonna throw out a normal 3-leg parlay and then 2 optional legs to add on if you so choose. So for me, it would be Kansas City -4.5, Green Bay +7.5, and Detroit -3. That would get you your pretty standard 6-1. Some additions to consider, though. You can add Cleveland on there at -2.5, and you can add the Bucs at +3. So those 5 legs together, it would pay out +2,436. So that would be pretty wild if we were to get 5 out of the 6 this weekend. I am staying away from the Buffalo one just because that is too many points in a playoff game, even though having referenced how big favorites tend to do in the postseason. I'll leave that one out of this one. So we'll just have a 5-legger.
I love it. You always come with just so much more value than me. I'm doing these just, kind of just lame 6-1, 7-1. And then John comes over the top with a 25-1er. We love it. All right, let's go to best bets. I'm taking the Rams. That's where I went in staff picks. I don't want to double dip here with only a 6-game slate. I like the Rams. I think they're getting points. I think they're the better team. I think they win this game outright. And that was, I wouldn't say an easy pick for me, but that's the one that I feel the most confident about.
I mean, all things considered, like I think that the matchup is has me tripped up a little bit, but the Rams are the NFC analog of the Browns, like the team that may not be the most complete, may have some wacky like things going on with it, but they strike you as dangerous going into the playoffs. They're absolutely a live wire. So I definitely understand the rationale there, and you built out a great case when we broke down that game. For me, my best bet is the Pack to stay within a touchdown. Give me the Pack +7.5. Dak in the playoffs doesn't particularly scare me. The Cowboys at home does scare me, but the way that the Packers have been playing to end this season here, I think that they keep this one close.
All right. I love it, John. An efficient 40 minutes here. We blew through these games. We love it. Very much looking forward to Super Wildcard Weekend. I feel like one of the more underrated sports weekends of the year. It's usually not mentioned in the discussion. People bring up the championship weekend, which is great, but we got a lot of games. I think this week and next week are my 2 favorite weeks of the NFL season. So very much looking forward to seeing how these games play out. I'm sure we'll be in close communication. Kind of a relief to not have to make Circa picks this week and, not just have my rooting interest be all over the place, sitting back, watching objectively. Your team's got a week off. I mean, you're just sitting as well as possible. My team's not playing until September.
Nick Saban can't bother me anymore.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You did tweet yesterday that you were legit sad that Nick Saban retired.
I am sad because he got us one last time. And Georgia plays at Alabama next year. I've been planning for 5 months at this point to go to Tuscaloosa next year, and I the entire vision was being the final stake through Saban's heart, and no, he gets to beat Georgia and then walk away. I'm pretty salty about that, but no, all seriousness, Saban's the GOAT. All respect to him. He's just caused me immeasurable amounts of pain.
Alabama's at Wisconsin next season as well. So we will see. That game becomes maybe a little bit more winnable for the Wisconsin Badgers. But that'll do it for us. Appreciate everybody listening along live. As always, you can find the pod archived on the RotoWire YouTube channel. You can always find us on our RotoWire NFL Twitter account. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your podcasts. John, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy relaxing before the Ravens are back in action next weekend. And looking forward to doing this next week, breaking down the divisional.